Maybe you can walk down the street. You see a family with their kid. You say hello. There's a lady with her little buggy with her groceries in it. And then she's going up the stairs of her apartment. You're like, hey, can I help you? And the lady's like, oh, yes, of course. Oh, you're such a sweet young man. And then after you help her, she grabs an apple from the grocery bag, and then she gives it to you. And you're like, thanks, lady. And she says, thank you. And then you keep walking down the streets, eating your apple. Then there's a dog, and then you go pet the dog, and then you go to the grocery store. How beautiful. Meanwhile, our reality is you get out of your car, maybe your best case scenario, your neighbor is mowing the lawn, and you go, howdy neighbor, and then your neighbor goes like this. You don't talk, because of course he's mowing the lawn, it's making a lot of noise, and he's busy mowing his lawn, which is very important. So you get in your car, you back up, and then you drive. You put the radio on, you listen to a couple of commercials, maybe a hit song of the month, and then you wait at the red light. There's people jamming in their own cars. You don't really pay attention to them. All right, green light, let's go. Oh, stop sign. Look left, look right. All right, we continue. Then, oh, turning into the parking lot, finding a parking. There's no parking. Oh, there's one. All right. Oh, wait. There's a goddamn motorcycle in that parking lot. Ugh. Go back. Go and you find one. And then you start walking to the grocery store. Wait, let's go back to what we were talking about. Now, NB says we can't destroy the automobile. Its utilities superseded any argument you could make to get rid of it. There's two things. First, I don't think it's about destroying the automobile. It's just making ourselves less dependent on it. Giving ourselves different alternatives to it I think is what a lot of people are advocating for. It's more like the criticism is about automobiles. It's like very often automobile dependency. So many people cannot function in their day-to-day lives without the automobile. And the reason for that is because we've become dependent on it. Second, the criticism is also to say that the automobile, like the criticism is not only about the automobile and wanting to destroy it or whatever, but it's also about the fact that our whole infrastructure is based around the automobile. So we've built a world around automobile, and then we say, well, how could we live without automobile? It's because we've built our world around it. And the idea is maybe we can remodel our world to transcend this idea. It's a new idea. I don't think in 1910s people went around in automobiles. Not everybody had their own car. It's not that old of an idea. People spend a shit ton of money on their cars all around the country. When I'm talking about like creating models of like to go beyond the car, it's mostly like in urban areas. I haven't really looked into like rural areas, like models for rural areas. But if a lot of the investments that we make socially together as a society, because we live in a society, if instead of putting them all in cars individually, which we spend a shit ton of money on, and we spent them in tramways, in trains, in subways, in buses, not only things will be faster and better funded, they'll be more efficient, blah 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 blah, but we'd live in a more sustainable world, in a world that's a little less carbon emitting. Yeah, as JCG says, public transit in the United States is inefficient in most places for sure. That's a problem. Here, it's extremely inefficient. We have, the thing is, with public transport, you kind of have to go all in or not go at all. Here, I can give you an example. To go to the nearest city, which is 15 minutes away from here, if you want to take the bus, you have one bus that leaves in the morning. And it's only a 15-minute ride. You have one bus that leaves it's not even the morning, it's like at noon, and one bus that comes back at around 5 or 6. So if you want to go to Chandler, which is the city, and come back, which is usually a 15-minute ride, 15 minutes to come back, you have to plan a 5 to 6 hour stay in Chandler. And then people who are in charge of public transit, they're like, yeah, we do have a bus, but nobody takes it. So how could we justify like investing in it? But motherfucker, nobody takes it because it's not a good alternative. And the thing is, if you want to build an alternative to automobile, you have to invest quite a bit in public transit. You can't half-ass it and expect people to do it. I'm not going to take a bus at 11, go do my groceries for max an hour, and then wait 4 hours in Chandler with my groceries in my hands, waiting for the next bus. It's not sustainable. It's not an alternative to cars. And of course, nobody's going to take that service because that service fucking sucks. You need to, like, and as Ed B says, he says, we can't destroy the automobile. Its utility superseded any argument you could make to get rid of it. The thing is, very often, public transit or public transport doesn't have the same utility because it's either underfunded or it's just not developed, as it is here. Potophile says, okay, back to the car issue. What alternative could you propose that's as convenient, efficient, and time-saving? I think public transport is can have the same convenience with enough investment. In terms of efficiency and time-saving, there's parts in cities where taking your bike is faster than taking your car. Obviously, you don't have to like deal with so much traffic with your bike. It depends. The subway can be long, but that's because the subway doesn't have like imagine a subway or a tram that instead of being there every 10 minutes or whatever is there every 2 minutes. That could be a reality if instead of like it's spending and investing so much in cars, we spend it in subways and exactly like in public transport. Lisby says, I think rural areas can be dense or can still be dense. Farming can't be and need a vehicle. Yeah, farming definitely needs vehicles. That's the thing when we say like we won't destroy every car, but rural villages can still be dense and served by public transport. Yeah, and the thing is, as I've said, I'm in a rural area, right? And as I've said, we've become car dependent. And the reason why is because back in the day, and old people love to talk about it here, is that every little village had bars. Every little village had a convenience store, had a grocery store, every village was self-sustainable in a way. And as time passed, as people got cars, my neighbor still remembers the time when people had their first car in this village. And at that time, everything was centralized in the village. Now, everything is centralized in the city. Because everyone has a car now, so everyone can, like, if they want to do the groceries, they can go to the bigger grocery store in, 15 minutes away. So what happens when everybody goes to the bigger grocery store? Well, the local grocery store closes. And everything closes until now, the only way you can do anything, well, is go to the city. And to go to the city, you need a car. So this mobility, though it does have its positives, obviously people were able to have to have a better to have larger choices in their in their consumption, also came to the expense of the village. And the problem is, I'm not against the idea that the city can have with more choices at the superstore and things like that. I'm not against that. But I think, for example, we can develop ways of getting there that's not so car-centric. Yeah, Lisby says I complain about buses only being every 30 minutes. But see, like that's a utilization and funding issue. If more people used buses instead of using their cars, there would be more funding and more of a need to use buses. And therefore, your buses, instead of going every 30 minutes, might go every 20 minutes, every 15 minutes, every 10 minutes. But people still want their damn cars. Reese's Pieces asks a good question, says, what would you say to people who reject the idea of widespread public transport in favor of personal cars due to the aspect of autonomy? I think that's a good argument, personally. Maybe some people will reject it a lot. I think it's a good argument, given that the world again is so car dependent. So you need a car to be autonomous only because everything that you need is in car reach in a way. I'll give you an example. When I lived in Montreal, having a car did not give me autonomy at all, because I lived in a city where I could walk everywhere, right? Or I could go to there through public transport. So the autonomy wasn't enabled by a car. The car was actually more of a hindrance on me. So I got parking tickets because I would not change the side of the road while they were cleaning it and whatever. I hated having a car in Montreal. So in terms of autonomy, the only reason having a car gives you autonomy is because we live in a world where without a car you don't have autonomy, if that makes sense. If you need a car to work or you know, it's part of your job, of course that makes sense. I'm not arguing that, you know. I remember seeing this argument that there was this construction worker who was like, yeah, I'm not gonna bring all my tools in a bus or in a tramway, and that makes sense, right? So I'm not saying that it's impossible to like that we have to get rid of all cars, but I do think that we live in a world where personal cars, the way we can see it, is not that personal cars give us autonomy, but that you're restricted for not having a car. And the second thing, sorry, to answer Reese's Pieces, rejecting the idea of widespread public transport in favor of personal cars due to the aspect of autonomy. Also, we need to imagine a world where public transport is better funded and more reliable and more a better substitute to cars. Because in a world where there's a lot less cars, that means people having more money because they're not spending on how much does the average American spend on cars? The cost of car ownership. So it's not buying a car, it's just owning a car. Is of $5,722. So imagine you can have a widespread movement or like a societal project around ditching the car in most cases, where people who have just like, let's say they have 2 cars and they're like, all right, like I imagine a lot of family have 2 cars because each adult need their own car because we're so car dependent. It's not the case for everyone, of course. But imagine like a lot of families just saying, all right, we won't spend on a second car, or we can maybe just ditch the whole car altogether. That $5,000, or now almost $6,000 per person. Let's say, like, of course, we're not going to spend all of it in public transport, but let's say we do. You would have you would have an amazing public transport system, like an incredible public transport system. Yeah, they're only including the loan and the insurance. They're not even including the gas. But on top of that, you have gas that people are saving on. You have repairs that people are saving on. Oil changes, tire changes if you live more up north. Proctophile says, getting pushback, which I like. I love. Okay, say you're going grocery shopping. How efficient are those alternatives going to be? Imagine boarding a bus with enough food for a whole family, or would you propose taking a dozen trips on a bike? Interesting. See, this is the you know how if you know the term capitalist realism, you know the inability of some people to imagine anything outside of capitalism. And here you have the inability of someone not being able to imagine anything outside of car dependency. So the thing is, if you don't have to drive 20 to 30 minutes to go to your local grocery store, I don't know how far your grocery store is. It could be 10 minutes. It could be 5 minutes. But if you have to drive there, what you're going to do is you're going to do the grocery shopping thing for the whole week, right? And those make for really big shopping trips. I don't know where you're from, the Proctophile, but I remember someone from Europe came to Canada and was like, your grocery shopping carts are huge, dude. And I was like, what kind of observation is that? Why are you commenting on the size of my grocery shopping carts? Like, do you not have any, or are yours really small? And they're like, yeah, ours was really small. You guys not only buy in bigger bulk, but you buy more than us. And how he explained it, his experience, is that first, they don't buy as much stuff that is in cans and stuff that is, they buy more fresh stuff, and they buy more often. They can go to their grocery store that's a lot closer and go every 3 days, get fresher foods, and go every, let's say, 3 days. That, you don't need a big car for 3 days worth of food. Maybe you do, but you can get those little trolleys that old ladies have. And if they can do it, you can do it. These things. And Lisby says, have you considered walking across the road to get shopping? That's the thing. If you live in a world which is car dependent, the chances that you can walk across the road to go shopping, you can't, are very slim. Most people live very, very far from any place where they could actually do grocery shopping. That's a good point, Alpaca Attack. They say people tend to associate car ownership with freedom, but we don't have the freedom to not own one. Exactly. Yeah, NB is right. You have closer merchants that you can go to frequently. I live in NYC. I grocery shop 3 times a week, take 20 minutes, and I only buy what I can carry. It's half a block away. And it forces you to interact with other people, which I know a lot of people don't like, but all right, let's talk also about the fact that cars are super alienating in terms of community. Let's take it's not just Proctophile there. I don't know if you're a conservative, but let's take the conservative angle. You know, back in my day, people used to talk to each other, and people used to know each other's names. I used to go to the grocery store, and I would know everyone, and I would talk to the cashier who was always there, and we could bond, blah, 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 blah. Community is what conservatives like. Cars destroy communities in many ways, more than one. Just take grocery shopping. If you, instead of grocery shopping 2 or 3 times a week, you might grocery shop once a week, maybe once every 2 weeks. But if you live closer to your grocery store, you can go once, twice, 3 times a week. Sometimes you're even forced to do it. In that case, your grocery store, if you have to walk to it, your grocery store is more local. So you get to see people. It's a smaller grocery store where you recognize people who go there because it's people from the community. It creates a better social bond. So it goes back to the small town kind of conservative ideal, right? Where even when I lived in Montreal, which was more, there were, as Aunt B said, I could walk to a grocery store which was very small, but I recognized the people who went there. I recognized the cashier. We go back to a more of a community, a small scale community in which it's a lot less alienating. And imagine I can walk there as well, right? I can take the metro. The amount of times I've been in the subway or the metro and I've recognized people I haven't seen in so long, and we spoke. And we're like, what are the odds of us being in the same train, in the same like little cabin thing, and us recognizing each other? And then we vibe and we're very happy. We haven't talked for like 10 years. And it's like, you know the vibe? You're listening to your music. You're like this. You don't want to look like stupid. So is that the guy from high school? Then the guy's also the same exact way, right? You're both side-eyeing each other in the subway. And then eventually you see that the person is looking at you the same way you're looking at them. And then you're like, and then the person's like, and you create relationships like that. Or you reconstruct relationships like that. It's amazing, right? Maybe you can walk down the street. You see a family with their kid. You say hello. There's a lady with her little buggy with her groceries in it. And then she's going up the stairs of her apartment. You're like, hey, can I help you? And the lady's like, oh, yes, of course. Oh, you're such a sweet young man. And then after you help her, she grabs an apple from the grocery bag, and then she gives it to you. And you're like, thanks, lady. And she says, thank you. And then you keep walking down the streets, eating your apple. Then there's a dog, and then you go pet the dog, and then you go to the grocery store. How beautiful. Meanwhile, our reality is you get out of your car, maybe your best case scenario, your neighbor is mowing the lawn, and you go, howdy, neighbor. And then your neighbor goes like this. You don't talk, because of course he's mowing the lawn. It's making a lot of noise, and he's busy mowing his lawn, which is very important. So you get in your car, you back up, and then you drive. You put the radio on, you listen to a couple of commercials, maybe a hit song of the month, and then you wait at the red light. There's people jamming in their own cars. You don't really pay attention to them. All right, green light, let's go. Oh, stop sign. Look left, look right. All right, we continue. And turning into the parking lot, finding a parking. There's no parking. Oh, there's one. All right. Oh, wait. There's a goddamn motorcycle in that parking lot. Ugh. Go back. You find one. And then you start walking to the grocery store. And maybe you'll cross someone that you know. But most likely, this grocery store that you need to drive to is the kind of grocery store that that serves a very, very large territory with a very, very large amount of people that you do not recognize. You go to the grocery store, you have 8 registry caches to select from. None of them you recognize, because it's all employees who hate their jobs and who do not want to be there, all wearing the same kind of uniform. They all look the same, so how could you develop a relationship with with people who all look the same? So you do your grocery, with your big shopping cart, unload it in the trunk of your car, close the trunk of your car, back up, you get out, stoplight, stop sign, you get back home, your neighbor's done mowing the thing, and he's listening to Netflix in his house. And then you take your stuff and you bring it back home. Huh? What do you prefer? What do you prefer? I'm romanticizing public transport and I'm demonizing car transport. But I hope by doing that, I highlight the differences between both, and I also highlight the alienation that comes from being individualized in small boxes to get to places. It's a generalization, but very often with younger people, sometimes you might have to carry the conversation a bit more, because we're fucking awkward. I'm awkward. You guys are awkward. I know you're awkward. But it's also because we didn't really have the experience. or the practice to be sociable. Again, it's a lot of things. One of these things is the metal boxes, I believe. That's one of the reasons why we're not sociable. We go to places where it's filled with strangers. Had it been filled with people that we cross maybe not every day, but every week at least, we might be less inhibited to talk to them, right? If I have to go do my groceries every day in a city with, well, it's not the case here, but I do the groceries in a city with 50,000 people, and the grocery is like serving a portion of these 50,000 people that come from all over, then striking a conversation with a complete stranger might not actually happen. I live in a small block, with a grocery store that serves the small block, and there's no reason for other people to go to that grocery store because it's really like tailored to that block. Then if I see someone for like the 5th time, they might come talk to me. I might go talk to them. If I recognize a cashier every time, I might talk to them and be a bit more friendly with them. And that develops sociability. Of course, when we are alienated, we're always alone, and we are surrounded by strangers every day. And when I say strangers, someone can be a stranger and like you see them every week, but I feel like the chances of them not becoming a stranger after seeing them every week becomes lower and lower the more you see them. If you see someone every 2 or 3 days for a year, eventually they're not a stranger anymore, right? I don't know. So I feel like in that case, sociability might be something that we need to develop, and that's the kind of thing that's not encouraged in the model that we've created for ourselves. The Proctophile says people just need to get out more often. Yeah, that we can agree on. That we can agree on. To go back to like the car thing though, having to take the car and having to pay gas just to get out is kind of a reason why I don't, contributing factor as to why I don't go out. I don't like driving. I find it annoying. I find it boring. I find it alienating. As opposed to walkable cities or places with public transport. If I have my monthly pass, I have every reason to want to capitalize on my monthly pass as much as possible. I'm lucky enough to have one of the few remaining local grocery store, though it might be closing soon. It's for sale, so we'll see how that goes. But I cross people when I go. I cross people that I recognize because I live in a smaller community, and that's an amazing feeling. It's a really, really nice feeling, and it doesn't I'm not talking about personal stuff with them, and I'm not talking about marks with them, right? If I talk to them, it's very often the same shit, and it's very often small talk in a way. But it creates links and bonds, and the small talk, though you might hate it, is just about deleting the inhibitions between two people, right? I talk to someone I've never spoken to before. Hey, what do you think of being a Marxist and an anarchist at the same time? Do you think those are incompatible? That's not how you create relationships. You see someone that you've crossed a couple of times at the grocery store, and then you see them again, and you're like, "Oh, really nice day outside, isn't it?" And then like, "Yeah, it is." And then you can start, or maybe you can just leave it at that next time. "Oh, it's a really nice day outside again." Yeah, it's been a couple of nice days recently. And you're like, "Oh, do you live around here?" And they're like, "Oh yeah, I live like down the street in that red house." And you're like, "Oh, you're the one who lives there." "Well, I live a couple of houses away." "Oh, really?" "Oh, well, nice. That's a really nice house." And then the person's like, "Oh, well, if you want, you can come for a visit one time. I'd love to show. I did some renovations recently." I don't know. Again, I'm romanticizing it, but you understand what I mean. It starts with small talk. You don't need to start talking about certain stuff with other people. Yeah, cars are freedom because suburbia is a prison. Thank you. Yes, exactly. That's really well said.